I saw a meme a few years ago. Basically, it was a picture, a series of pictures from an interview, it looked like, and they had quotes from the interview. And it was basically they were interviewing an author who I'd never heard of before, and I don't remember who he was. And basically, someone had asked the question about, you write such great female characters, how do you do this? And his answer was, I treat women as if they're human. Which is a good answer, not a bad answer at all. And, if you want to, I tried to do some amateur writing in my time, and yeah, writing woman characters is hard, and trying to write good women characters is hard. But, I mean, he brings about an interesting point. The opposite is also true, and that is, when you are writing a female character, you have to treat men as if they're human too. And this is one thing I noticed even before I saw this meme. Was the attempt, we want to write strong female characters, which I have nothing against, but in order to do this, we have to make all men seem incompetent. And I've seen several, not all female characters do this, but I've seen several. It's like, this is it. This is how we make our strong female characters. We just surround her by incompetent men. And so my question is she really a strong character or not? So that's what I'm going to look at a little bit today. So before I forget the name, Kinsey Malone. Some of you might remember. Sue Grafton wrote a series of books, the Alphabet Murders or Alphabet Mysteries or something like that. A is for alibi, B is for burglar, etc. And she had her female detective, Kinsey Malone. And I'd heard of these for most of my life, and when I was about 30, I decided I'd start reading them just to see what they were like. Local library had about 5 or 6 of them, and so I've only read about 5 or 6. The earliest they had was B is for burglar. Then I think they had C, D. They skipped like F and H, and so, like I said, I've read about 6, got most of the early ones in order. People say you don't have to read them in order, but it sort of helps because she introduces characters throughout. And so if you read book D, then they might start mentioning a character that you haven't seen before because you didn't read book C. And so the early, B, the B book, B is for burglar, not a bad story, but I did notice, yes, she's trying to make her strong female character, and by doing this, the men were incompetent for the most part. Now, I continued reading, and as I went on, she did introduce, as she continued writing, she introduced more competent male characters. And they didn't take away from the fact that Kinsey Malone was the hero of the story. She wasn't suddenly the damsel in distress to these men, but they were people she could trust. They'd watch her back when she needed it. And so the stories did get better again because it wasn't we have to force this strong female character on the world. It was she can be strong and men can still be competent. And so it became, she became a more realistic heroine because it wasn't just her against the incompetent men, like Wonder Woman. Golden Age Wonder Woman, it was Wonder Woman against a bunch of incompetent men for the most part. Steve Trevor was incompetent. Actually, for the most part, most of it was started during World War II, so it was her against the Nazis for the most part. And it's wonder how did the Third Reich last as long as it did if the Germans were as incompetent as they were made to look like in Wonder Woman. Now, female, Baroness Gunther, she was a German spy, and she was competent. And Cheetah, the Cheetah was first introduced, and she was competent. So the female villains were competent. The male villains weren't. Just as Steve Trevor wasn't. Now people argue that Wonder Woman was the first, the first female superhero. In reality, Hawkgirl was out a year before her. Now Hawkgirl was Hawkman's sidekick, so people say, oh, she wasn't a real hero, but she was competent. The men around her were competent. The villains she fought were competent. As a sidekick, Hawkgirl was a stronger character than Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was ridiculous. Golden Age Wonder Woman, ridiculous. Silver Age Wonder Woman, ridiculous. It wasn't until about the Bronze Age where they started making Wonder Woman a real hero. A hero you could believe was an actual hero. Because they started giving her competent men to fight against. And like I said, nothing against strong women, nothing against competent women. Female villains are great, but if the only way, Wonder Woman, to make her look strong, she had to fight incompetent men, no, it doesn't work. Speaking of other heroes which are better than Wonder Woman, Captain Marvel. Now, back when the movies came out, there was a lot of talk online about how the Captain Marvel movie was worse than the Wonder Woman movie, and blah, 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 blah. That was wrong. Same reason. Wonder Woman made men incompetent. She fought Ares. That'll give her. This time around, Ares was competent. Golden Age Ares was actually called Mars in the comic books. They called him a god, but they portrayed him as an alien. And he was a very incompetent alien. He lived on Mars. He needed a spaceship to fly around. He had his underlings who were also a bunch of incompetent men. Saying, Wonder Woman fought Mars back in the Golden Age and because she defeated a god, she was powerful. No, the god she defeated was actually an incompetent alien. So, back to what I was talking about with the movies. Some people complained Captain Marvel made Nick Fury look incompetent. And not really. You got to consider. So, Iron Man. In the comic books, Iron Man developed his suit while he was being held prisoner in Vietnam, because Iron Man originated in the 1960s. In the movie, they moved it up to the Middle East somewhere, and it took place in the year 2000, and that is when Nick Fury was introduced. That said, Captain Marvel was sort of a prequel to all this, and she met Nick Fury back in the mid-80s, 1985 I think it was set in. So the Nick Fury of the movies was the equivalent of 1950s Nick Fury from the comic books. In other words, S.H.I.E.L.D. was still somewhat new. It had existed during World War II according to them, but Nick Fury was still somewhat new to it all. Possibly never encountered aliens. He did encounter alien technology, or S.H.I.E.L.D. had at least. But, how much had they dealt with aliens? How much had Nick Fury dealt with aliens? We're talking, in the movies, he was the equivalent of a 1950s comic book. Which, again, didn't really exist much for the S.H.I.E.L.D. universe. S.H.I.E.L.D. existed in the Golden Age under different names, and then Marvel bought them out in the 60s. So there was actually a gap in the 50s in the Marvel continuity of things. But the point being, yes, this alien woman, or a woman with alien powers, meeting a human who sort of knows about aliens but hasn't had a lot of experience with them, yes, she's going to overshadow him a bit. She's going to make him look a little incompetent. She's got, she grew up with technology which he's only seen a fraction of. She has power. So yes, Nick Fury is going to appear a little incompetent next to her just because of the way the characters are. That said, he still pulled a few tricks, because as he is Nick Fury. You can't treat Nick Fury of Captain Marvel as an extension of Nick Fury from the earlier movies because he's 15 years younger. See if anyone accepts that as an answer. So anyway, then we got Wonder Woman, and yes, she's an Amazon-trained warrior. She is superior to all these men. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's the basis of the character. Except that, so her and Steve Trevor are going to go to Germany to infiltrate and stop Captain Poison and find Ares. Okay, that's acceptable. Steve Trevor puts together his band of 5 or 6 people that actually I think it was only 3 or 4, but these are supposedly experts in their field, and these are guys I can trust, and these are guys blah 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 blah, and they go to Europe, and when they get to the continent, these guys prove to be incompetent at everything they do. Almost, I mean, other than Steve Trevor blowing up the plane in the end, him and his friends are completely incompetent. We do have the one scene where, they're in the trenches and Wonder Woman leads the charge and all the American soldiers and the Allied soldiers, they follow her out there. And yes, men look competent here. Did we have trench warfare during World War II? I'm not sure. I was going to look that up before I started this, but I forgot to. I know it was more a World War I thing. World War II, the Germans occupied France, and until D-Day, we didn't really have any troops on the land there. So when exactly this took place and whether or not the whole trench warfare scene was realistic, I don't know. But at least the Allied soldiers weren't completely incompetent. She led the charge, which is fine because she's a superhero, and they were just mere mortals. But other than that, the rest of it, like I said, Steve Trevor's group of experts were incompetent throughout until the very end when Steve Trevor blows up a plane. Because in order to make Wonder Woman look strong, they had to make everyone else look weak. And you really can't have, if that's what it takes to make a female character look strong, then you're sort of failing to make a strong female character. Lara Croft. Video game, Tomb Raider. Video games all had their backstory, but they weren't all that, most people didn't care about them. She didn't really have any main characters other than Lara Croft so far as now. Never really played the video game that much. But we basically had this strong female character. And we accepted it, because, I mean, all it was her running around raiding tombs. It wasn't really a big backstory. Like I said, characters had their backstory, but it wasn't, like, really intense. We didn't have to follow up on it. They made the movie. Again, they didn't really... She had a sidekick who, wasn't as strong as her. But we accepted it because the video game, backstory. We realized most of the plot of the movie was just made up. Let's make a movie based on a video game, and the video game itself doesn't really have a huge backstory to it. So the big thing is we have this female character who's good at raiding tombs, and so Tomb Raider comes out, and they have Angelina. I think was it Angelina Jolie? Can't remember. Haven't seen the movie for a while. And we accept it again because our background to the character was that, yes, she does all this stuff and she doesn't really, not much to do with, there was no sidekick in the video game. There wasn't, it was just very much, we were happy that she matched the video game to some extent. I, again, didn't play the game much, so I don't know how much she did actually match the video game, but we weren't looking for, it wasn't about a strong female character or, we must make her stronger than men or anything like that. It was about the movie sort of matches the video game, and so we're happy with it. Actually, I forget. I thought they made a sequel to the movie, which didn't do as well. And so now we got Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which I have not seen, and I don't know if I want to see it or not. Um, but a lot of people are complaining because it's woke, supposedly. And their definition of wokeness is they appear to be grooming a woman to take Indiana Jones's place. Um, they tried this before. The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they tried to introduce his son, which is one of the reasons why that movie bombed as much as it did. Honestly, comparing the action scenes to the other, the other Indiana Jones movies, Crystal Skull wasn't that bad, really. And they tried to incorporate humor, tried to incorporate action, etc. I mean, really, there are two big problems with this. One, they brought in aliens. The other movies, they sort of had, the Lost Ark and the Holy Grail, and they had, even, Temple of Doom with this Indian stone, which, most people would be unfamiliar with. We accepted. This is stuff out of mythology. This is stuff we are slightly familiar with, and so we could build a story around it. Crystal Skull, we just threw in some aliens and just expect people to accept the whole premise without any kind of background on it, which most of us didn't like. So, like I said, it was that and the fact that they appeared to be trying to replace him with his son, which people didn't like. And so now that we come to Dial of Destiny, where again we now have this female character who they seem to be trying to replace him with. And was it really woke? Again, nothing against the female character being strong or being heroic. That of and by itself is not wokeness. So is it a woke movie? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I might go to see it someday. I don't know. It's the idea they are trying to replace him. It's believable with the way some movies have come out that, in order to make her a strong female character, they have to make Indy look stupid. I don't know. Again, I haven't seen the movie. Not getting any spoiler alerts because I'm speculating on this. But the point being, if that is what's happening, then no, she's not a strong character. The franchise deserves to die. Honestly, I don't think they should try to, it's an Indiana Jones franchise. Trying to continue it without him, they should just stop making movies. And create a different character. And it doesn't have to be connected to Indiana Jones. It could be a standalone character with her, her own movie franchise. The fact that they aren't trying to do that and they want to hang on Indiana Jones's coattails makes me suspect that she probably is a weaker character than they're trying to make her out to be, or she probably comes out as a weaker character, I would assume, because again, that's the way they do it, is either make Indiana Jones look like a fool compared to her, and therefore she looks strong, or make could they? Back to Marvel, they got Anita Hill, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'd sort of like them to make an independent movie with her in it. Just sort of her against Hydra, Nick Fury puts her in for a promotion. This is her test to see if she should get her own lead or her own team or whatever. She goes out. They could make a good movie like this. In the end, she decides, no, I'm not ready to lead. I want to continue to work for Nick Fury. Wouldn't interrupt the rest of the movies. Well, it could be a good movie. We don't necessarily need superheroes. We just have, this super agent against this, resurgence of Hydra. And sure, they've still got access to alien technology and stuff, so we can still make it a good, interesting sci-fi movie. I think that would be a good movie. And they could do it without making men look incompetent, because Anita Hill, she is in, she worked with Nick Fury and other competent males. So, we already have that set up for her. She can be against a villain who is a competent male. And we won't, Marvel's done a fairly good job of balancing their villains with their heroes. So it's not like, he would have to be incompetent to make it a good movie. And we would accept it. And so that's basically all I had to say. I'm not against strong female characters. I watched Xena. I watched I watched other shows. Xena, with Joxer was of course a joke character, but she was also side by side with Hercules, and with Autolycus, the king of Prince of Thieves, and other competent male characters. And she didn't have to make all the men look stupid in order for her to be a good female character. There are other, I could probably go on and list others. Catwoman sort of goes back and forth as a character. They weren't sure. It depends on, as you go through the movies, the cartoons, and the comic books, she goes all sorts of different ways. Like I really don't have a list off the top of my head. I'm not going to make you watch me try to think of a list. I just want to say, strong female characters can exist. I have nothing against them, as long as, like I said, your definition of strong woman isn't all the men around her are idiots. Because, again, that's a large part of the feminist movement is, instead of making women equal to men, it's let's tear down men in order to make women seem better. And that's one of the reasons why various factions of the feminist movement fail, is because it's not about equality, it's about tearing down men. And so, like I said, I'm all for strong female characters. I like them. Yeah, they can be realistic if they are done realistically. And so let's just start doing them more realistically. That's all. Have a nice day.